to kind of people, that don't make any sense at all. You can't do both. That was a real eye-opener for me. Oh, okay. Now I have a better understanding. And maybe if I can speak, cross-culturally to some of the values that people have. That's why I like his stuff. I like his approach to moral emotions, too. Make a lot of sense.
In your book, you use Rodrigo Duarte as a case study and as an example of the dark side or evil for some of the things he did. It was interesting for me because I had a number of students in my class who were from the Philippines who had a different belief of what he had done and what a hero he was for their country. Are our values and beliefs or ethics different country to country? I mean, we see their country one way and they see their country another way. How do we find a way to the truth?
Well, it's a key question. In fact, some people don't even want to study ethics because of that question. They say, it's so culturally dependent. I reject that. I know there are differences, but I think we find common ground. That's how we can have the Hague Court judging crimes against humanity. We can do business cross-culturally. I believe that there are some, and I suggest some of them in the book. Human rights, for example, the co-principles and so forth. So I believe there can be common ground because I think I don't like the alternative. If we can't reach common ground, then whatever you do, whether it's bride burning or whatever, is okay. And I guess I would say I see parallels between support, and I think I noted that in my case study, Duarte. He has support. He's an authoritarian, law and order kind of person, which is very attractive to a number of people, and that's pretty constant. I think that's why we've seen a resurgence of authoritarian regimes here, nationalistic regimes. In China and other places, we've seen a reversal, and I think it's because of fear of globalization. Our identities feel threatened. That's why we're anti-immigrant oftentimes, anti-minority groups. But one thing I think, going back to hate, that Jonathan Haidt, that I think is powerful that he says it plays in here too, is we need to realize that for those of us in academia, our values aren't everybody. White, highly educated academics, that's not how most of the world thinks. And I think we see that split even within, I don't know about Canada, but we see that split in the United States. Last election between who voted for Biden, who voted for Trump, a lot of it divided along not just economic lines, but educational lines too, college educated or non-educated. If you let me digress for just a second, I think that's a whole nother issue that we face, which is we now live in a time where the truth is in play. What's truth? What is, we sound like philosophers. What is truth? We have people who deny that what happened at our Capitol January 6th, those were just angry tourists. Those were just anti-Trump people carrying Trump signs. So let's not investigate. It's, and the election was stolen despite 80 court cases that were rejected. So I'm trying to deal with that. We all deal with that if we teach, if we believe in education. We're at a time now where truth is up for grabs.
And influenced by Google.
Yeah, Google. And you mentioned, and it's not just platforms, but in the United States, you can pick and choose your TV news. You want conservative, go Fox, and then there's One America Network out there, or MSNBC, and CNN now has become more like MSNBC, at least during the Trump era. So and radio, conservative radio is very big here. Liberal radio has not taken off near as much, but so it's media platforms. It's and you can choose your TV and radio if you want.
Mind you, media has morphed in so many different ways. And again, whether it's media or whether it's the internet, you can find your tribe.
Yeah, and that's a good word. I think we've become more tribal, which probably feeds in to the us and them sort of mentality. If you're not part of my tribe, I reject it. And certain things are part of the package of being the tribe, like being against climate change is part of, for many people, part of being the tribe, of being a conservative, for example. And why, I'm not quite sure. But anyways, yeah, or wearing a mask or not.
One of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you was you seem to have gone out of your way and be very generous in not just limiting your book to a white Western point of view. You've been very generous in acknowledging other countries, other cultures, and other influences on ethics and business.
Part of it was personal. Part of it was driven. I got interested from a student, got me interested in Taoism and that approach, and saw some parallels. And another colleague who was Chinese got me interested in Confucianism. So part of it was there. Part of it was a publisher, particularly on gender issues. Made me very sensitive. I need to be more inclusive as a white male to other points of view. So to try to bring in more examples, more approaches. Yeah, still very U.S. oriented, but trying to bring in other points of view as well.
I don't want to come across as being American as a bad thing,
but
recognizing your position, but also acknowledging all those other influences, I think was a really nice gift. I really like the way you framed it. Can you talk to what keeps you up at night? What do you see from your perspective? You've been writing on this topic for 20 years.
I said it's hard to judge whether things are getting better or worse, particularly in business, but I will say I am concerned about a couple of things. One is globally the movement towards nationalism and authoritarianism in China, in Hungary, in Poland, in the United States. That keeps me up. I feel like democracy is under threat in the United States. So we've moved beyond, at least for me personally, we've moved beyond political differences, policy differences to, I think we came very close to undermining the very foundation of our governance. That keeps me up. Then I have the concern about how do we teach and operate in a world that has a lot of people rejecting truth or claiming alternative realities or buying into QAnon conspiracies and so forth. Those would be two things. So, in the introduction to the book, I have to be careful because the publisher thinks I'm a little dark at times, but that does get me down. But on the other hand, on a personal level, to balance that, most of us can find in our personal lives good examples of teachers, of coaches, of mentors, of friends who have been ethical and have been role models. So it's not all bad either. But those two trends are the ones that I'm most concerned about.
As countries open up, millions of consumers are streaming back to stores every day to shop. Is there an ethical issue and leadership issue in that opportunity?
Well, there may be some operational. It'll be interesting to see how many people go back to stores. They seem to be, as well as are we going to all gather in the workplace again? If we do stay more isolated, working from home, there is evidence to suggest that we're more likely to lie, to be aggressive, et cetera, in a mediated environment than we are face-to-face. That would be an issue. The issue for me right now has been our reliance, let's say, on Amazon, which I have a number of, it seems to me Amazon is now taken, Walmart was sort of the punching bag for a while, but I think Amazon is now, for the way it's treated people, its employees and so forth. So I shop there, but I do with some real concerns. So, will there be less reliance? And maybe that'll be a good thing if we go back to stores. So.
Has your teaching changed over the years?
Yeah, I think I've changed, at least in the physical classroom. I've always known that attention spans are limited, at least among undergraduates. And so trying to involve students, but I've actually now tried to be even more physically involving students. Let's vote by standing, those of you who believe X, stand over on this side of the room. Those of you who believe Y, let's stand over. Let's debate this. To actually get physical involvement has been one technique that I have used more and more. Always tried to be more active, but switching around. Tried to maintain some things in terms of, if I mess up, it's not the student's fault, it's my fault. It should always be to the student's advantage, trying to maintain that individual connection, which I found harder. I came in late. Somebody had a medical emergency. Unfortunately, he died here recently. But I found it really difficult to know the names of all the students with two large sections, where I struggle with that. Maybe it's because I came in a third of the way in, but that's maintained. But I think, that physical activity, trying to let students to learn, maybe earn some extra credit, but force them to learn along the way. Every week I'll post some ethical issue out there. Should we be listening to Michael Jackson if he really was a child molester, the whole cancel culture, for example, things like that. So try to incorporate some things online that weren't around when I started teaching.
Yeah, good examples. What advice would you give to a young student thinking about a career in business?
From an ethics perspective, get a sense of your personal values, your mission as much as possible, which is one of the things I try to talk about in my ethics courses, is try to get a sense of where you're headed. What coursework do you need to get you there, in addition to the technical skills, and realizing that it's not just technical skills, but it's also your moral reasoning ability that's going to be key to your success in business, or whether it's communication arts or whatever. I still think the communication skills are critical. Know your audience and speak to the audience is still important. And it shapes my writing. I get into some topics that others probably don't, just because of my communication background. That's why I divide my book more by levels, organizations, groups, as opposed to picking bribery as a topic, as a unit, and hiring as another one.
So what haven't we talked about that we should talk about?
I think it's going to be important to keep up with the research. Is always evolving, keeping up, being on the lookout for, from an instructional point of view, there's always seems to be a new case that's coming out to deepen our understanding, to try to develop practical ways in our own lives to respond to these issues. I don't see any lessening of interest in the topic. The books keep selling, surprisingly, even as it goes into more and more editions. And I think there'll probably be more books out there as we go forward.
The seventh edition missed the end of Donald Trump's election, the murder of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, another war between Palestine and Israel, and countless human rights issues that continue to go on around the world. I guess two questions. Is there light at the end of this tunnel, or is it a train? And what's in store for the 8th edition?
Well, already working on some cases and some topics. I think I'm going to do the George Floyd approach I was struck by how critical the bystanders were. I don't think Chauvin would have been convicted without him, and the bravery there. So that's probably going to be my angle there. I'm going to do a case there. I'm doing a case on John Lewis, this congressman who recently died, who was part of the Freedom Riders and all of that. It's been interesting with Trump, because I didn't want to make my book a bash Trump all the time kind of book. So I tried to use, in the last edition, the EPA administrator and so forth. And that's a developing story, because we'll see if criminal charges come against his organization and so forth. I'm trying to think. I had Dolly Parton in the next edition as an authentic leader. The more I learn about her, the more I admire her.
It doesn't sound like there's a shortage of topics.
Oh, there's no shortage. The Nexium, the sex cult thing, is one. So, and that's the thing. When you write multiple editions, you're always on the lookout for cases. Ooh, that might work, or topics, and that's one of the exciting things. Oh,